Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show you really an immortal attack played by the legendary Mikhail Tal against Boris Spassky back from 1973 from the Tallinn tournament. And this was a great tournament. I think we had many great players like Boris Spassky, Tal, Paul Keres, Lev Polgaevsky. Many of these top grandmasters, Russian top grandmasters, play in this tournament, and Misha, the legendary magician from Riga, crushed them all with a perfect result. 10 out of the possible 13 points he gained, and this was maybe his best tournament that he played. He played really an attractive style. Here we have in this tournament we had also some great positional pairs, but you see in this game between Mikhail Tal and Boris Spassky that Mikhail Tal would choose really an aggressive opening. It's the so-called Auerbach Gambit. And it's really a good gambit. There are bad gambits, there are good gambits, but the Auerbach Gambit is a perfect gambit. I think you see how problematic it can be. It's really an evil opening, and that's why I decided to show this game. It had really some great tactics, of course, because Mikhail Tal is playing. Sometimes his tactics went wrong, but in this game, everything he basically played this game perfect, and that's why I think it deserves to be on our list of this best chess games of all time. So let's check out the game. D4 played by Boris Spassky. Knight to F6, we have C4, E6, the Nimzo-Indian defense, and after knight to C3, bishop to B4, still common tier. We have bishop to G5, the Leningrad variation of the Nimzo-Indian, and now it gets already tricky. H6, what to do here? Retreating with the bishop to D2 is not such a good idea, because our main goal in the Nimzo-Indian is to play B6, bishop to B7, occupying then after that the square E4. So retreating with the bishop would force, of course, black maybe to give up the dark square bishop in an early stage of the game, but this E4 square in the continuation of the game, because you have already lost some tempos with your bishop, is not so good. So that's why here Spassky retreated with the bishop on h4, and here comes this critical position of this Averbakh Gambit. We can play the move c5, forcing our opponent to do something, and Spassky continued to push with the move d5, and it's similar now to a Benoni defense, because Mikhail Tal used to play the Benoni defense also often. He had also some great tactical games in the Benoni. And here after the move c5, White's main idea is to build this powerful center with the move e4, then maybe developing knight to f3, and here already b5 by Mikhail Tal. This is this so-called Auerbach Gambit, and the main idea about this gambit is to deflect these two pawns from the center. So we want, we want this pawn to deflect from the center, because in the middle game, central pawn is much more powerful than a outside pawn. And you see how important this pawn storm will be that Mikhail Tal will create, because now we're deflecting basically a central pawn in order to make these three pawns very active. And it's really a good gambit. I think you can use it. I'm sure you will have some great success. I got my ass kicked also a couple of times in this particular opening, so it's really a good opening. It's I would always like to point you out some good gambits, not these bad gambits. For instance, the King's Gambit is a bad gambit, but the Benko Gambit, the Blumenfeld Gambit, or maybe here this Auerbach Gambit are perfect gambits, and you see the problems now in White's position. Here, d takes e6 was played by Spassky. Perfect move, so Spassky didn't make a mistake so far. After f takes e6, now c takes b5, and now you see these problems of White. Here we have these three pawns, which this d pawn will of course advance to d5, and black will have a perfect pawn storm. And the difference, for instance, between this Blumenfeld Gambit, if you're familiar more with this Blumenfeld Gambit, is that you don't have this bishop on b4. In this Blumenfeld Gambit, you have the bishop on e7. So it's even this Auerbach Gambit is an improved version of the Blumenfeld Gambit, and it's really more powerful. Here in the game, d5 was played, and here e3. We are not allowing here this pawn to advance, then we would have troubles to develop the pawn. And now castling played by Mikhail Tal. Knight to f3, queen to a5. You see how easy it is now for black to find the best pieces. Now we are attacking simply the weakness on c3. You have to protect it. Here bishop to f6 was played, which is, I think, the first mistake that Spasky played in the game. A better idea, I think, is to play here the move queen to c2, protecting, because you don't have worries immediately of this d4 move. This d4 move will be the main tactical idea by Mikhail Tal to try and make some progress, use the spin so far and attack this weak knight on c3. So, but I think after the move a6 we can simply play the move bishop to d3 here. After a takes b5, castling is a good idea, and now after c4, which is of course an attacking move, but now bishop to g6 is the possibility here for white. White has regrouped, white has secured the king, which is the most important thing. And here in the game, as I said, after the move queen to f5, bishop takes f6 was played by Boris Spassky, giving up the bishop pair in an early stage of the game, and you don't want to do that against such an attacker like Mikhail Tal. Now rook takes f6, of course, is the problem, and here you see why this bishop takes f6 is a mistake, because now this rook comes very actively into the game. The key defender of this d4, as I said, we want to make this happen. We want this d4 move to happen, because we have still this very powerful pin. In order to make that happen, we want, of course, to get rid of the knight. So a rook to f3 sacrifice is possible with some d4 pawn breakthroughs. Here queen to d2, played by Boris Spassky, trying to defend, and now a6. The idea behind this move is, again, to deflect another central pawn, again outside of the board, and now when white finally takes this pawn, we can include our knight, because the knight was out of game, and we don't want to develop the knight on an unnatural square, which is the square d7. We want to have it on its most active square on c6, and now this idea to push the pawn on d4 is perfectly fine with some potential rook takes f3 sacrifices. This exchange sacrifice will be the main tactical motif in this game. So b takes a6. You see, the Tal is not worried about this pawn. He's not counting pawns anymore. He just wants to make this goal work, and he wants to really crush Spasky with an immortal attack, because bishop e2, we have now finally this move d4, e takes d4, and now rook takes f3. This is the main attacking theme. Bishop takes f3, and now finally c takes d4. And there is maybe now a choice for white, but you see now the problems. If you, for instance, take bishop takes c6, basically the game is lost, because you get first this move, d takes c3. You have to move the queen. Maybe queen to e3 is a possibility, but now here c takes b2 is losing immediately for white. You can maybe move your king to e2, but now this bishop comes actively into the game. It's not about taking the rook anymore in this particular line. This bishop's activity is too much to handle. Now this rook will also come into the game, so white is lost. Let's see, king to f3, we have rook to f8, king to g3, bishop to d6. You see how easy it is now to find the best attacking moves, because this was a really great attack by Mikhail Tal. King to h3 is not a possibility, because you get checkmated immediately on h5, so you would be forced to play something like, I don't know, king to h4. But now rook to c5, rook to f4, really we have perfect attacking harmony with these pieces, and again white is lost. So that's why after the move c takes d4, finally Spasky secured the king, but it was a little bit too late. I think here Mikhail Tal simply took. Again, he found really great tactics. I just want you to imagine how many moves he had to calculate ahead, because it's really incredible. He left here after the move b takes c3, after bishop takes c3, queen to d6, now rook to a6, and now this is really a forced tactical sequence, because bishop takes c6, you have to lose the bishop, and basically you're continuing the game with a bishop for the rook. But the activity of black's pieces is too much to handle, because still this bishop is pinned, and of course Mikhail Tal calculated all of that, and here he played bishop to b4, attacking the queen. The queen cannot defend anymore the bishop. That's the problem. If you retreat somewhere, you just lose the bishop, and black will continue the game with the bishop pair against the rook, and that is deadly, of course, against Mikhail Tal. Here Boris Spassky tried to counterplay with some queen to b8 ideas. The main idea is of course to attack the bishop, but Tal simply took rook takes c6, and now after rook to c1 we have a very nice move, bishop to c5, closing the c file, not allowing some dangerous threats, because this bishop is still a little bit out of game. And this bishop on c5, I want you to memorize this nasty bishop, because it will be the best piece on the board. It really aims on a dangerous square, f2, and this is now of course the main tactical motive by Mikhail Tal, to do some tactics around the square f2. So in the game, rook to c2, trying to double up rooks, because the only way is for Spasky to win this game is to somehow maybe grab the bishop without losing some material, but it's not possible, because here Mikhail Tal simply played a queen to a4, queen to b3. This was an idea of Spasky to simplify the position after trades of queens, maybe to double up rooks on the c file and try finally to grab one of these bishops. But Mikhail Tal, of course, is not interested to trade off queens when we are on the attacking side. He played the move queen to f4 and now queen to g3. If you try, for instance, there is this tactical threat. I just wanted to show you the main attacking idea here by Mikhail Tal. If you try to double up rooks immediately, then you get this move bishop to f2, and you're gonna be checkmated, because taking out the rook is not a possibility. The bishop is not a possibility, because you have some troubles on the first rank, so you would be forced to play something like king to h1. But now queen takes c1. You're the one that you have troubles on the c file, although you have played the rook battery on the c file. But you see, Mikhail Tal played very actively with his pieces, placed the pieces on the best squares. After rook takes c1, we have rook takes c1, and it would be game over. So that's why after this move queen to f4, Spasky realized these tactical threats by Mikhail Tal, played the move queen to g3, and now queen to f5, staying on this f file, because as I said, this is now our main target. Rook to c1, and now bishop to b7. Very important move. We want, of course, also to include this bishop, combined with these bishops really are aiming against White's king. And now we have queen to f3. Of course, again, we are not trading off the queens. The problem is now, if you, for instance, try immediately queen to g3, again, it's game over, because again, we have this same tactical threat. If you try to take with the queen, again, queen takes c1, rook takes c1, rook takes, and you have to cover with the queen, and black is going into a favorable endgame with this extra bishop, so it's not a possibility. That's why after the move queen to g5, as I said, Spasky tried queen to b3, trying to hang on to this position. Now this idea doesn't work immediately, because we can take with the king, it's not so dangerous anymore. But now rook to c7, this is now really a great attacking move. I'm not sure how many of us would see this move. The problem about this rook had really a great activity. It's not only that it defends this b7 bishop, the more important thing about this rook is that this rook will change the direction of the attack and will create also some attacks on the f file, because it's this rook is a little bit blocked out by its own pawn. We cannot include this rook in the attack somehow, maybe through the f file or the g file. So not that this move rook to f7, rook to c7 is protecting this bishop on b7. Now we have really a great possibility to really reorganize the attack and play rook to f7. g3, dangerous move here by Boris Spassky, because you see, when you try to close the dark squares, you see, then you're opening the light square. So this is the problem when you face the bishop pair. Whatever you do, whichever pawn you move, it's really a new weakness in the position. So here in the game, bishop takes f2, again the same tactical threat. We have king takes f2, but now queen to f6. Here you could try maybe to escape to g1 again, but again it's a lost game, because we have simply queen to d4, king to f1, and now rook to f7. You see how important it was to place this rook on the 7th rank, where we can again attack the king, and after something like king to e1, we have queen to e4. You would be forced to cover with the rook, but now queen to h1, again we will have sort of a ladder chess tactic, really triangulation attack here by the rook and the queen. You cannot cover everything, you cannot cover all files, you cannot cover all diagonals. If you try king to c1, c2, then you get rook to c7, and now you would be forced to cover with the queen. Rook takes c3, king takes c3, and now queen to c1. So this is the great attack here by Mikhail Tal. After this move, queen to f6. Spassky played king to e1, hoping to escape somehow with the king, but now queen to e5 again attacking the king, and now king to f1, bishop to a6. You see how this bishop is really problematic. It really attacks the king dangerously. Here, king to g1 again, but now it's the same idea, the same tactics will happen. King to d4, we have king to g2, we have queen to e4 attacking the king, king to g1, and now very important move, bishop to b7 with the preparation to create really this important battery. The problem is you would love to take the rook, but this rook was the defender of the g2 square, so if you take the rook, then you get checkmated on g2. So you see how Mikhail Tal plays this game, really creating new threats in the position. After the move bishop to b7, h4 was played, but now queen to h1, king to f2, and now rook to f7. Here king to e2, and after queen to e4, in this position, Boris Spassky resigned, because if you try, for instance, here queen to e3 to cover, then you get bishop to a6. You have to cover with the rook, or you lose, or you're gonna be checkmated. But now bishop takes c4 is the main idea. If you take, then we can take with the queen, and we're continuing the game with an extra rook, and again it's game over here for the legendary Boris Spassky. Great game by Mikhail Tal, great attack. Including these bishops into the game, really this exchange sacrifices, the pawn breakthrough motifs, decoy motifs, deflection motifs, overload motifs, great attacking possibilities here by the legendary magician from Riga. I really enjoyed this game. I hope that you also enjoyed this game. We'll continue with this best chess games of all times. Meanwhile, you can watch my other best chess games that I've analyzed so far. Here's the link, and you can also watch my commented chess games played by computers. If you want to see more of this best chess games played by Lila, C0, Stockfish, and some other engines. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.